What's a subtle sign that someone had a rough childhood? Story 1. My sister-in-law adopted 3 siblings who are completely self-sustainable at a very young age. When they were visiting, I noticed a lot. If I gave anything to the oldest boy, he would pass it off to the youngest sister. Then I'd give him another, and it went to the middle sister. Then I'd give him another, and he'd finally keep it for himself. I asked if they wanted water. He said yes, and I asked if the girls wanted water too. Oh, we can all share this one. Obviously, I gave them all water, but that one hit me pretty hard. He knew their eating schedules and would nag my sister-in-law. Offered to make them mac and cheese or noodles or whatever we have lying around. Promised to clean up after. He was 12 years old. When normal kids play video games, they're glued. This kid was constantly checking over his shoulder to make sure everyone was safe, and if he felt one of his sisters was up to no good, he would put the controller down even if it meant dying or losing his progress in the game. To elaborate on up to no good, what the oldest brother considered bad behavior was pretty innocuous. There were several instances of things I consider normal childish behavior that he would regularly put a stop to. The most outstanding one was being too loud. It wouldn't even be yelling or screaming, just typical 5-year-old make-believe noises that would cause him to run over and tell the little one to keep it down. Oh, that's a lot for a 12-year-old to take on his shoulders. I hope he and his sisters are doing better now, and their future will be brighter. If anything, he was taking on more than what a parent would take on. Not only did he have to parent them, but he also had to enforce the strict standards that his abusive parents put forth. Standards that change based on time of day, how they feel, whether or not they're high/craving drugs, etc. I'm sure it would have been easier to just raise them on his own in an apartment, totally unsupervised. They're no longer with my sister-in-law, but they still have contact with her and are in a better place. Ugh. The stories those little signs could tell, I'm sure. I'm glad to hear those kids are in a better place. No child that young should have the kind of responsibility, and none of those kids deserved whatever abuse they had gone through. It is just heartbreaking to see kids acting like that when they should just get to be kids. Story 2. The first lesson we learned in childhood is, how much am I worth? Our caregivers are the first to reflect this worth upon us. From when we are infants and toddlers, if we cry, will someone come to us? If we fall down, will someone pick us up? To when we are kids and teenagers, do our caretakers choose to spend time with us? Do we get help with school/friend trauma? There is an important balance here. As kids, we want to be taught that we are equally important as everyone else. Some kids are taught that they are less important, and as adults, they may have a hard time asking for help. They think they are bothering someone when they have a problem. They may also prioritize the needs of others based on an underlying belief that other people are more important. Some kids are taught that they're more important than others and therefore treat others poorly and have trouble learning empathy. They try to justify in their own minds why they are better, which can lead to some narcissistic type thinking/behavior. Well, this explains a lot. I also grew up being taught that I'm always fine and there's nothing wrong with me, despite having multiple things wrong with me. So I feel like that also factors into why I struggle to ask basic help. My son is 1 year old, and one thing we've been very conscious of is staying away from phrases like, "you're okay." It seems small, but it can minimize how someone feels like what they are feeling isn't valid. Instead, we try things like, "that's scary, isn't it?" when he falls, or "I know you're hungry, but we're going to have dinner in 5 minutes" when he's hungry and crying. Small things, but they matter. Yeah, I remember when I would be scared at night with the lights off, and my parents wouldn't be like, "there's nothing to be afraid of, go to sleep." Instead, they would say, "I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain." Like the OP said, small things, but they matter. Story 3. I remember going to summer camp as a kid and meeting Milo. Milo was big on attention-seeking and validation and would take food from the cafeteria back to his bunk, like eggs and toast. I remember thinking he was just weird, but I think looking back and knowing what I know now, he was probably being neglected at home. Thin as a rail and probably malnourished, so he wanted as much food as he could get and just wanted someone to acknowledge him. Pretty sad stuff. I came here to post about food hoarding. Obviously, there are a lot of reasons why a person might have a complicated relationship with food, but food hoarding is often specifically a behavior that stems from childhood food insecurity. If you don't get to eat regularly as a little kid, your lizard brain may never really believe that whatever food you have is enough. I think that can be generalized to a lot of behaviors. Whatever you are missing out on as a kid, attention, affection, food, security on some level, you're going to be seeking that out for the rest of your life. This is my husband all over. We have an extra fridge freezer, a large chest freezer, and a converted food pantry in the back of the garage because the kitchen was full to bursting. There's so much food here we could withstand a siege. I just go with it, but I understand why he does it, and it has come in very handy during the lockdown. Story 4. From the horse's mouth. People-pleasing behaviors. Class clown always agrees. Overcompensating with laughter during conversation in an attempt to appease others. Self-idolating. Stops contacting friends for seemingly no reason due to feelings of inferiority/worthlessness. No motivation to make anything of themselves, believing they would only fail anyway. Allows themselves to be bullied, usually hangs out with/dates abusive people. Conspiracy theorist, can't live without a sense of impending doom, will unconsciously find one. Extremely nervous when doing new things in front of others, so mature for their age, didn't get to be a kid/teen. Total inability to accept compliments. No or very few distant friends as an adult. Barely any memory of childhood. No happy stories of childhood. Extremely negative self-talk. I overcompensate with laughter. I've had people ask me how I'm so funny and happy all the time, as if I have no problems at all. Like I literally sob for hours, unable to stop regularly. I just feel like if I can't laugh at stuff, then I'll end up crying. I have severe depression and have struggled with self-destructive ideation for years, but I doubt most people in my life would guess that. I tend to use humor as a crutch, but not because of a rough childhood. I mean, we struggled a bit as a family, but my childhood was overall pretty solid. I was just super shy, and humor was the one way as a kid that I felt comfortable interacting with others. Joking is my default a lot of the time because it is the area of communication I am most comfortable with. Story 5. Haphiphobia, or the fear of being touched, is definitely one of them. Flinching at loud noises or quick movements, wanting to be at work and doing good all the time. Inconsistent hobby practice, i.e. drawing but only sometimes drawing, and then dismissing what you drew as not good enough. Can you describe my issue with hobbies, please? I can't focus on one. I think I'm not good enough and find a new one, think that I'm supposed to be immediately good at something. I hate it. Well, because of that, I have a very vast amount of knowledge on very random things, but it's never deep knowledge, if that makes sense. I feel this so much. Growing up, I was one of the kids who didn't have to study but still got good grades. I think that translated, at least for me, to the lack of stubbornness to get good at something. If I don't pick it up quickly, I think I'll never get it, so I don't try. And since I never put effort in, nothing I do is ever good enough. I'm in the same boat. I can talk about tons of random things with people, but just for a bit, then my knowledge runs out in any given topic. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but all that to say, I feel ya, and it kinda sucks sometimes. Story 6. Insanely independent. They've learned not to trust anyone to help them, so they do everything themselves. I do this because during my childhood, I had no one to depend on. It has been very difficult to create intimacy as an adult when you don't want anyone to do anything for you. You should read Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. I did it last year, and it discussed the different kinds of emotional immature parents and the types of defense mechanisms their children tend to develop that last into adulthood and relationships. One of them being some kids manifest their anxiety that they don't really understand is anxiety yet, by becoming super high-functioning when it comes to problem-solving and generally learning how to be competent adults. Like the feeling you learned as a kid of, you have no clue what you're doing, do you? Makes you do a 180 when developing life skills, but deep down you can be an anxious mess whose worst fear is feeling like your life is one f*** away from being out of your control. I read that and thought, welcome to who I am. It made so much sense once that book made me think about it. I'm not gonna lie, this is hitting a little close to home, but I'm not sure. What I do know is that I really kind of want to read this book now. Even if it doesn't totally apply to me, I feel like there might be some really solid stuff there. Any books you all in the comments would recommend? Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video and have a great day. Story 7. Watch their table manners. Meals are forced contact time in bad households, and it can easily show. Some examples are becoming less talkative or withdrawn during meals. They realize their elbow is on the table and they jerk it away quickly, or something innocuous like a sneeze at the table causes undue shame or embarrassment. Conversely, someone who grew up without parental guidance can also develop odd eating habits. In the case of a coworker of mine, they collect the condiments near them. She would put the ketchup bottle out of the little rack on the table, use it, and then keep it by her plate instead of putting it back. I asked if she was done with it, and she said, "Oh, sorry, I ate a lot of meals alone growing up." Turns out she grew up with a single mom who worked 2 jobs, and she was used to nobody being there to pass things. I have to constantly remind myself to slow down when I'm eating with other people. My siblings and I inhaled our food because the faster you ate, the faster you could leave the table, and less time at the table meant less chance of getting in trouble for something. If my dad couldn't find anything to be mad about, he'd settle for having attitude, which meant whatever he wanted it to mean at that moment. Christ, this thread is reading like my childhood trauma greatest hits collection. Folks watching this video, this is my reminder to you that if this stuff is bringing up any emotions, even if you're like, my childhood was fine, it still might be worth a little therapy to talk it over. There could be repressed issues. There might be no issues at all. Therapy is good either way. Story 8. Everyone is different, but the one that automatically raises a red flag for me and makes me extremely worried is when someone flinches for no reason. I wouldn't say it's for no reason, but I don't know what other word to use. So really sorry about that. Like, you raise your voice slightly at them and they flinch. You raise your hand to grab something near them and they flinch. You look at them in a certain way and they flinch. You hug them and they flinch, etc., etc. I joke about being a fainting goat, but I'm so hypervigilant that I nearly jump out of my skin at any kind of startle. But this is exactly why I'm like this. My old boss used to be like this. Seemed like a completely well-adjusted, healthy person, but if you startled her, she would jump out of her skin. We used to clamp down the hallway to make as much noise as possible before entering her office. Found out much later she had an abusive dad who worked nights who used to rage and kept her walking on eggshells her entire childhood. Story 9. Can't figure out whether or not to permanently cut off contact with parents or who go back and forth cutting off and trying again and cutting off and trying again. Even considering it means your childhood was X. And if you want to but can't do it, it probably means your childhood was X times craftier than that to erode your sense of self and healthy boundaries to the point where you know what you have to do, but have been brainwashed by your oppressors to the point where you can't bring yourself to do it. Also, thinking that achieving something their parents want will mean a happy relationship with them afterwards, as if their love was to be won over. My mom always pushed me to get married. I was so excited to tell her I was getting married, thought she would finally think I was a good person. Well, she tried to talk my SO out of marrying me, telling him I was a terrible person and couldn't love anyone. In the end, he decided he didn't want to marry me anymore. First off, I am really sorry you had to deal with a mother like that. That is just awful. I think there's a balance to parenting where you want to gently push your child to be the best they can be and achieve harder goals they might otherwise give up on, but having a child who feels like they can never make their parent proud is way too far in that direction. I'm not sure where the healthy balance is, but I think it's important a parent always strives to find it. Story 10. Boundary issues are common. What helps to keep in mind is the 4F model of trauma responses: fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. When you notice somebody's reactions are easily categorized as one of those and it is very persistent pattern, adverse childhood circumstances of some sort are a pretty safe bet. Is the general idea here that they've already been through traumatic situations enough times that they've wired themselves for a consistent choice within the 4Fs? As far as I'm educated on this subject, and as far as I understood your question, the 4Fs are a fear response, and depending on one's resilience, your nervous system might develop one of these responses as a main response. Something needs to happen very early in life and repeatedly over a long period of time. In short, 4Fs equal fear response equals survival. My fear response is freezing, and I hate it, although with time and the help of therapy, it has gotten a lot better. Story 12. Being very calm and collected in serious/emergency situations. Having to deal with stressful stuff all my life has made me very capable in tense situations. This could go the complete opposite way too, by the way, just my experience. Many of my friends has me listed as their emergency contacts instead of their parents because they're like, I know you can actually help out instead of just flip out. My childhood wasn't tough in the my parents hated me, treated me badly sense, but they are just basically children, completely unreliable, unable to plan, spiteful in the way teens are. I had to take care of everything, so now I'm just good at keeping it together. Good people don't always make good parents. Wow, that's a great way of putting it. This is why we're estranged, rather than anything they did. Having to parent our own parents are not worth the frustration and stress. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.